Okay, so we have a full agenda here about technical call. If you haven't added your name to the to the Google Doc, please add your name to the Google Doc. I posted a link earlier. If for the ones joined late, if someone can post a link again, that would be greatly appreciated. So it's and the first thing is the kind of the MicroProfile 4.1 release. So it's so far we finally agreed the CCR, so the compatible the record certification record. So that PR was created on the MicroProfile umbrella release. So it's basically it's when we release the MicroProfile 4.1, we need to create this CCR. And if some other runtime want to certify against the MicroProfile 4.1, also they created this CCR. So they just need to create one CCR on the MicroProfile kind of umbrella release. We don't need to create all these 8 CCRs for the included compatible component releases and etc. So it's for the release timeline. So it's because 4.1 included MicroProfile health. So I know Martin is on the call. So Martin, when do you think the health will be ready?
We are basically ready. I'm only waiting for the outcome of that startup probe discussion, and once this is decided, probably tomorrow, I will close the pool. I will cut RC2, and I guess I can stage it by the end of the week.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Martin.
Emily, I have a question. Can I interrupt before we jump to another topic? What if we want to certify, but not on MicroProfile 4.1, but let's say MicroProfile 3.3? Would it be possible to do that?
I don't think so, because 3.3 was released, and also we didn't establish that was released before the working group was set up. So there's a kind of 3.3. You just claim you support 3.3. That's it.
But why we can't establish a process to certify on the older version of MicroProfiles? I think it's actually for good, because more implementations listed is better.
Because the 3.3 released without all the required copyright for the Eclipse Foundation and etc. and etc. There's a kind of all released before this process was established. I don't think it makes sense to claim it. I'm wondering, anybody else have other thoughts?
Well, we're also not up to date, so I'm intrigued by Dimitri's question, but I do understand the complexity of the fact that we don't have a spec with the appropriate Eclipse Foundation specification license on it.
Right.
So, and we don't have a TCK licensed, Eclipse Foundation TCK license binary for the TCK either.
I suppose
we could go back and release like a 3.3.1, right, or something like that, right, that would comply with all these requirements, right, if we wanted to.
Or a 3.2 or something like that. That's
what
I was going to suggest. If we wanted to do that, then yes, we could make that, how do you want to say it? Make that release, comply with all of the rules that are required for the EFSP. And then, and the TCK licensing, and I don't know if that would be worth the effort or not. I mean, if Dimitri or David or anybody else, if it's worth the effort, do you think we should be putting that on the agenda?
For us, it makes sense because Heliodot is not going to be 4.1 certified, because we are planning to jump over version 4 directly to version 5 of MicroProfile. And we do have 3.3 compliance already, at least of TCKs are passing. So yes, we are interested in basically be listed as compatible implementation, definitely.
Yeah, on our side of the fence, we're at 2. So there's already a 2.1. So if we were to do that, we would need like a 2.0.1. The jump between 2 and 2.1 is, I believe it's open tracing 1.2 to 2.0 or something like that. I can't remember exactly. And that's where we got stuck. Anyway, I don't know that it's worth it. I mean, it feels like I'll ask. I mean, I would feel kind of guilty asking the community to do that if there's work involved with it.
So this is exactly what I wanted to ask. Would that require us to go back to MicroProfile 3.3 for individual specs and do like point releases for every specification where we include licenses, etc.?
I don't know how, you know, we could potentially just do an umbrella spec, make a zip file that has all the TCKs in it, put the license in that zip file, and assume that it propagates to everything contained. That could be one way to do it if you wanted to do it cheaply.
But the thing is, the individual spec, like a dog, have is the license header as well. I don't think you do the umbrella like the platform spec can cover that.
You wouldn't be able to certify to the individual specifications, but you know, if we did an umbrella spec release, and I'm not advocating for it, I'm just talking through the thought process. If we did an umbrella release, it would be sufficient to simply put the TCK license in the umbrella release binary of the TCK, which could be, like I say, a composition of all the TCKs, and in the umbrella specification. You don't need to have it in like you don't need to have it again.
So what's the issue with passing the 3.3 TCKs? Is it that there's no patent protection with just kind of doing what we did before? And just claim that we support MicroProfile 3.3, you know, if you pass the 3.3
Right.
TCKs.
And maybe I'm putting words into Dimitri's mouth here, but it sounded like, yes, the old process we could continue to use, but it's not as official or formal as the new process. So we wouldn't have, you know, a CCR, we wouldn't have a compatible implementation as defined by the EFSP.
Also, you couldn't use the logo, the new logo.
Yeah, that was the main one.
Yes, definitely we're interested in be as much official as possible. But I understand that if it's a big effort, we may kind of help with provide some resources, but need to discuss internally first. I kind of don't see the amount of work required at the moment. In other words, I don't see how complicated it is to make that release.
Yeah, and Dimitri, I don't know if any of us really know how much work it would be. It would kind of have to be examined and compared to what we did for the 4.0 release and what would be required. You know, like what David was pointing out, if we only looked at it from a platform perspective, that could narrow the scope a little bit, or quite a bit, actually.
Yeah, quite yeah, if we talk about go back to create a branch for each of these 8 specs, and then do all the work, do the license and TCK and etc. That's quite big.
That would be way too much work.
It's more like a 3.4 to me.
That's amount of work. Yeah, change the license effectively. and also the way to package as well. There are others for the spec files and etc.
Okay, in this case, let's just keep it in the agenda, and let's just take some time to think about that. Maybe move the discussion offline to the mailing list,
Okay.
and make a decision later.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, because then all people who might have ideas can jump in also.
Mhm.
You should
Yeah.
add a note about the potential of a simpler way of MicroProfile 3.3 with a umbrella spec only, or a MicroProfile 3.4 with all the specs got changed.
3.4 is kind of a bigger deal because all dependencies must be updated and so on and so on. The umbrella spec, if I understand well, correct me if I'm wrong, it won't change the individual API versions, right? It will be just something saying that these APIs with these versions are released under this license, and these versions of TCK are released under that license. That's it. So in this case, it would be perfect. But if APIs versions are changed, basically it means that implementation needs to uptake in other versions of APIs and so on and so on. It's kind of a bigger deal.
Yeah, I think at a minimum we'd have to do a 3.3.1, right? Because if you go to the MicroProfile releases page, there's already a 3.3, right? And it's kind of understood what it is. Now with the 3.3.1, we don't have to update dependencies necessarily of the individual specs.
Yeah, that's the point. And the API keeps the same for the end user. It's only a change of the license.
Yes, that's what I
Platform
meant.
level. Yeah.
If something like that was going to happen, then we would be like, okay, can we do a 2.01 so we can do the same thing?
So go back all these 12 releases and go back to all of them.
But I don't know that we would, you know, if that wasn't going to happen, we would just live with the situation that as it is and just do our best to try to get to 4.1 compliance.
Yeah. Why don't we move forward? Like to say is kind of, if Dimitri, you're saying you are thinking about 5.0, if we release 5.0 sooner, probably you are better off to wait for the 5.0.
Well, I understand his request because the market has a way of ignoring you until you have the official seal, and you know, it doesn't put you in a good spot. But anyway, if we could do it, I did have a related question, like how are we planning the whole umbrella TCK thing? Have we discussed that?
What do you mean? I mean, umbrella TCK. I think last
What
time
are our certification requirements for the
right. So the last time, the consensus is basically pass these 8 combined TCKs from the component specs.
Okay.
So it's the Jakarta EE ones are optional.
Yeah. So basically, you just go fetch the 8 individual TCKs yourself, and
yeah, right.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks. So the next one is Edwin, you put in about plan review ballot.
Yeah. So last week I sent out the 4.1 plan review ballot. There was some confusion on the ballot time, but ultimately I got it right because Kevin jumped in. So the latest version of that ballot is open now. So anyone is free to vote. And tomorrow, 7 days have passed, so all the votes are in. I can close the ballot, and we can continue. Because I think Martin is especially waiting for this.
Okay, that sounds good. So we are still shooting for hopefully July date.
Yeah.
Early July, late June.
Yeah, I was hoping I had the EFSP or the MPSP open, but I can't find it. So how many ballots you're going to go through until the final? Okay, I'll look it up. So yeah, that will be July somewhere, I guess, if we go for the whole process.
Okay, thank you. I think it's the spec.
We can stage health and MicroProfile umbrella at the same time. So that would be only 2 weeks for both ballots to complete. I think that we can still meet June, end of June.
Yeah, so we can take this offline, Martin, and get on Slack and get this thing done.
Sure.
Yeah, we can revisit next time. Okay, sounds good. Thanks. So the next thing is MicroProfile. Yeah.
So sorry to interrupt. So we have the first and the third Wednesdays are the days that the EMO likes to vote and review and vote on these releases. So, and they want kind of a week ahead of time.
Yep.
To review that. So if we I'm sorry, I'm looking at the calendar here, and the third, I need to go to month view, sorry. The third Wednesday is the 16th of June. So that means by the 9th of June, we would have to kind of have everything ready for review.
Yeah, so that would be then the release review part.
So it's a 19th of June. Basically, you got things stage and a ballot can start.
Yeah, I think we can, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but I think that they can do the review and we can have a ballot simultaneously, right?
Yes. Yeah, we actually even did that with a portion of the TCK for Jakarta E 9.1. So, yeah, that's doable.
And can Umbrella and Health have the same review at Eclipse?
I think so. I think it's the same project. Basically, just the one epilogue will cover both.
Yep.
Yeah, just give them a heads up.
So basically, we just need to have everything staged and tagged before 9th of June. I think 19th. That is possible.
Yeah, before 19th.
No, 9th.
9th?
Yeah, the 9th.
Oh, no, 9th. No.
Yeah, because you need to have everything in place for the Eclipse review, which the second one in June would be June 16th.
Oh, I see. Okay.
You need to have it ready a week in advance.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Okay.
So would that be the progress review, the release review, or the MPSP update? Which release are we?
Release review.
Release review. Okay. But is there a progress review in between them, or is it either or?
What a review? Say that again.
I have the MPSP open here. You have the creation, the plan, the progress, and the release review, and then the service release review. But this is not. You don't have to go through all 5, right?
No.
No, exactly. So we have now the plan review open for that one, and then we will go through to the release review. There's the next.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
That has to be in June 9th.
Yeah, June the 9th.
Yeah. Okay, then I got it right.
Okay. So that's all for 4.1. Okay. So for the 5.0, so it's basically this is kind of the purely Jakarta E9 alignment. So it's with currently MicroProfile Health is doing update, but for other specs, they can go ahead to do the Jakarta E9 alignment. So basically, is basically pull in the Jakarta E9 APIs. At the moment is just updated the parent, the MicroProfile parent, or this pulled in all the Jakarta E9 APIs. So it's so the spec can directly use the parent form and directly like pull in the Jakarta E9 APIs. So I'm thinking like for the current master, so all the kind of spec master can directly pull in the Jakarta E9 APIs. And then in the MicroProfile 5.0 will be purely Jakarta E9 alignment, and then we further development on the MicroProfile 5.0. And then if some other like customers and etc. require some spec and feature change needs to be support Java X namespace, maybe we can do the 4.2 release. So this is what I'm thinking. What about others? What do you think?
Shouldn't the adoption of MicroProfile parent be a requirement? So all the specs use the second?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think is the next thing is kind of because the health. I know you already adopt the MicroProfile parent, and also Roberto change the MicroProfile config to use parent. So that's the kind of that's the MicroProfile config. I will just move up. I will just do a MicroProfile parent is the 2.0 release, and then the MicroProfile config can depend on 2.0 from a MicroProfile parent.
Yes, so parent should be adopted by everyone. I mean, it was made that way to actually simplify a lot of what's being done into the specific projects. I believe that we haven't adopted on all the other projects or all the other specifications yet because there was no need for it, right? So the parent only came out after we did the last release. So didn't require to actually change the project. I did it for config just to prove that it works. And then Martin did for health because it requires a release, right? But I think from now on, we could have all the other projects to move to the parent as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's much nicer. And from now on, we should like enhance the MicroProfile parent and to like guard all the dependencies and such. So with that, at least the config is in a good position to make more progress. And then the other spec can directly copy what the config does for the MicroProfile parent. And then we could release is quite quite soon actually. So I mean here we would like to find out what about time, like the time frame. When do we want to release 5.0? Surely it needs to be after 4.1. If 4.1,
yeah, exactly.
Well, if we're trying to follow our normal historical cadence, right, it would be an October release.
Yeah.
But I suspect there's a lot of discussions that have to happen. I think it's less, well, no, that's incorrect. I was going to say less technical, but there are TCKs and stuff that have to be updated. But a lot of it's going to be around discussions, right, namespaces and all that stuff, probably. So I don't know. We could throw out, it's a forcing function to move things along. We could throw out October. I just don't, I have no sense of whether or not we can make it.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to put a time there so that spec can try to try all effort they can to meet that target. If we say, okay, whenever, and then people will just say, oh, okay, I have other high priority task to do. This hasn't got deadline. I will push that further. So I think it makes sense, John, to say, okay, October we want to get a release. But if something does happen and couldn't do it, and we make it slightly delay.
Yeah, it's probably pretty aggressive, but it's a stake, and it's a soft stake. It's a stake in the mud, right? So we could always move it.
Yeah, but it makes sense. And for the one is out, then we only have to do 5 because it's very dedicated to one specific thing. You got alignment and the MP parents. So you have kind of 2 months ish to implement that. That should be doable, right?
Well,
Yeah.
from my perspective, and I brought these a couple of times now, it's not only about us making a decision to move forward, right? Because we're talking about the specification projects for them to move to do the change. But remember, we cannot do a release without having implementation as well. So it needs to be a joint effort between a spec and an implementation, or multiple implementations. That will be my desires. There were some talks in the past about splitting the implementation work between the vendors, so we don't have a single vendor or a single brand doing all the implementations, like sometimes happens, or at least happens most of the cases now. But we haven't moved that much into that space, or we didn't have much discussions on how to move forward in that space. Anyway, I believe that we have to go back into that discussion, because yes, I mean, the specs can move forward and have everything ready by October, but if there is no implementation, then there is no point in trying to timeline something which is not going to be possible without the implementation work, right?
But for that, I mean, when we talk about spec group, they work on the API, they work on the spec at the same time, they also work on the implementations. I think is for the people working on the spec, no matter like, I mean, which company they work for, I think the joint effort is to release the spec. So, which means like people will collaborate, will say, okay, we want to use this implementation for the CCR, and people will say, okay, I will help to just get that implementation ready to be able to certify against this stack. I think we have to, like all the people in that on that spec need to work together to get a release done. I think is the other thing is if some spec said like actually we need help, I think as a community and etc., I think we should just help out.
Well, what you're saying, and let's see if I got this correct, is the spec members or the spec group or the spec commuters are expected to help on the implementation side of things. Is that what
Yeah.
you're proposing?
Yes, I think is also need to help with the implementations side. So basically, it's kind of the thing is that you can't really release a spec without implementation, like being able to post this spec.
Sure, I mean that was my whole initial point, right? Because right now, except for some exceptions, you usually have one person doing the implementation work. Give me a sec. Sorry, it's my son.
You want to join in?
Yeah, he's going crazy over here. Yeah, so I was saying that right now, usually what happens is the vendor, or at least the vendor people from the spec group is the people that do the work, right? So if other people join in to help, that's also part of the spec group. I'm completely fine with that, as long as that happens, of course, right?
Well, in that case, I'd like to volunteer Tommy, and everyone can co-work on Tommy for me.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So I think it's
Everybody
like
okay with that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I except for one little thing, which is as far as I know, Tommy is still not even MicroProfile 4 compliant, so I don't think we should have to do the past work, right?
Why not?
I mean,
I'm being slightly facetious. I mean, basically, you know, we do need to have an implementation there at the deadline. You know, but we either get some implementations to say here's the date we can make, and then we just choose the soonest of the dates offered, right? That's probably the only pragmatic way to handle it, is everybody just say, here's the date that we could potentially make for a conversion. And then we go with the release date for 5. That's the soonest of the dates offered.
Well, keep in mind too that we have a platform spec, right? So we could have implementations of each of the individual specs, but someone's going to have to wrap it up into a full platform implementation.
Yeah, I was referring primarily to the platform one. That kind of answers everything. Right. So if we get people, you know, if we were to run that exercise, I would bow out because, you know, we wouldn't be ready anytime soon, you know. But if we're going to take the statement that everybody in the community has to go work on this implementation, you know, then I would want to get in on that. You know.
Well, sure, but in my vision, then it is a more pragmatic approach. If you pick up something that's already up to speed with the latest version, not with something that's still lacking some versions, right?
I get it. And I say I was being slightly facetious, but I think the most reasonable thing would be, if we're going to continue to not choose deadlines because of the implementation blocker, then we need to change our approach and start by asking the implementations what deadline they could make first.
Yep, I agree with that, David.
Well, that's exactly, that was my entire point from the start, right? I was just saying that we because we were trying to put deadlines here without putting implementations on the loop. And that's the only point I was making, which everyone seems to forget most of the times.
So I think is this time like deadline is not hard deadline. So basically, this is suggested like the deadline suggested kind of time frame, something to like aim for. If it couldn't meet, maybe be it. So it will be delayed and then push it further. So this is the kind of things is at least we have a goal. I mean, to aim for. The other, we are not going out. We are not going to release anyhow in October if nothing is ready. So it's basically we just this is soft target, and when we're making progress, we revisit. So no, that's too aggressive. We move to November, and then later on we hit some other roadblock, maybe December. So gradually, I think it is being agile and to say, okay, we try to release this year.
Well, that's fine. I mean, I won't mind to work with like a tentative date of October or something else without having like a full commitment on that, because we still not aware or we're still not sure exactly what kind of work is required. But if you have the members from my spec group helping on the implementation side of things, no matter which implementation is going to be used for the individual TCKs or the platform TCKs, that's okay. Now, with that in mind, I would like to move forward with the other part of your proposal, or at least your conversation, because we still have to decide how we're gonna move this forward, in the sense that there was that document where we have like multiple choices, right? So I guess that we moving this forward, we eliminate some of those choices, but I think there's still the option of doing the backwards features or not, or like to support both 4.x and 5.x and backward any new features that go to 5. So I think we still have to have that discussion and make a decision on that.
No, I think I probably joined before we discussed this. So basically, it's the kind of photo X will be a Java X, and now we are doing 5, like photo 1 we released, and then we do the 5.0. That will be a purely Jakarta E namespace alignment, and then that will be like on the master, and then we making progress on that Jakarta namespace, adding any new features and etc. And then photo X is still yeah there if like some features is needed and need to backport to Java X, and then that spec can go ahead to do release, and then maybe we can do like a photo X release. I think it's a kind of not blanket like a statement that we say, okay, all the features add to MicroProfile 5.0 must add to photo X. So it's kind of we after release 5.0, we see what's adoption and and etc. Get some feedback, and then we still have an option to do a photo X release.
But based on what criteria are we going to decide if we do any kind of backport and for which specifications then? So is it then purely based on what users like to see in a certain implementation, or?
I think that's based on some implementation. Maybe they have customers, they ask for this one on Java X, and then they come back and saying, oh, okay, we would like to this one to be backported to Java X namespace, and then maybe we just do photo X release.
I think that following that kind of approach is opening like a big kind of worms. I mean, there might be, especially because you don't know how the API is going to evolve, and there might be options where you have to backport pretty much everything because one particular feature depends on whatever other things people implemented, right? So it's kind of non-linear, and I also think that it's just going to be too much of a work and too much complex to have to maintain two separate branches, two separate of everything, right? Because it's going to require, you're still going to have to require 2 implementations, one for each, and then you still have to go and backport whatever features people choose to backport. But I mean, if you look into the Jakarta case, is Jakarta backporting stuff from Jakarta 9 to Javax right now?
We can't because of legal restraints. So it's never come up.
Well, but I mean, isn't it confusing if we do it, even if we have the option to do it, isn't confusing for the end user that we are doing the backports and Jakarta is not, no matter the reason?
I think one thing to keep in mind is that if we were to backport anything, that would require a plan review, and that would require everyone to vote on that plan review. So whether or not so what I'm saying is that whatever we decide now doesn't make the decision made. We'd still have to vote on it. And so I don't know that it would necessarily be, well, let's put it this way. If someone did want to backport something and they had a compelling case for it and they said, I'm willing to do all the work, and they put the plan review up and everyone votes +1 on it, then it seems to me that that's a done deal. And I don't really see an issue with it. But if people don't vote +1 on it and the plan review doesn't pass, then that seems to settle it right there. Seems like we've got a process already to handle this.
Yeah, good point. I think that makes sense. So basically, the mainstream is we go forward. If something needs to go backward, and then we have to reassess the situation. So in this case, the rebuttal is basically is just like from now on that master is Jakarta namespace.
But do we have to make the decision if the next MicroProfile release will be 4.x or 5.0 now? because I think there are two steps necessary for MicroProfile 5.0. All the specs that are already there must be finished with a namespace change. That's requirement 1. And then there might be new specs with a new namespace 2, or the old one. And if for the MicroProfile 5.0, we also need the umbrella spec implementations ready, which only can be finished after the specs are finished. And at that point, I think we have to decide if the master goes to 4.x for the next release or 5.0. And we have a notion of what is the correct time frame for 5.0. You know what I mean?
I think the plan currently as laid out is that 4.1 would be the last 4.1 that we know of, and master would switch to 5. And if someone wanted to do a 4.2 for whatever particular reason, they would be required to put up a plan review detailing exactly why they want to do a 4.2. And they would have to convince everybody to vote +1 on it.
Yeah, so that's a very good summary, David. So with that, actually, it's like we can the spec can make a progress with the Jakarta E9 alignment. So it's like for config, and we'll get started very shortly. So it's like a spec can go ahead to do release actually. So they don't need to such as the config could release very soon. Maybe it's in July or sometime then, and then other spec can directly consume config and etc. and make their own release. And then it's gradually umbrella release will gather all of them to do a kind of umbrella release, the platform release. Okay, I think we can move on to the next topic, which added by Rudy. Rudy, do you want some?
Yeah, well, it's because there was the question for the JW out spec to include the Jakarta bin
not
file.
all the spec, Rudy. This is
or all the specs.
JWT,
Oh, yeah, okay.
Only JWT and Open API, the trying to make investigate whether it makes more sense to incorporate
okay.
validation.
For those then, but in general, it is adding it to the MicroProfile in general because it will be then available for all of them if you put it in the umbrella also. I know there is some mentioning of those things in the plan for this year, but there was no discussion about it. So the idea, the question that comes up is this required? Because there is no discussion. There was no discussion. Is it? Are there any specific use cases for any of those specifications where it could be interesting for developers to have it? It ties in, of course, with all the other things that are on the agenda of the growing pains. Is MicroProfile not becoming too heavyweight? Because if we also includes like it was indicated in the plan that we include JPA, then we practically have the entire web profile of Jakarta, and all kinds of these questions comes up then. So I would like to hear the opinion of the group around these.
I think that was added for us to have those discussions. I mean, nothing was set in stone. Nothing is decided on what's going to happen, right? So I remember that the JPA was added because it came up a couple of times on that document where we asked it for the community feedback. So that's why it was added to the plan. Beam validation was something that I added personally because I look into, for instance, the Open API annotations, and they are pretty much, they repeat a lot of the stuff that you have on the beam validation ones. So it's quite a pain. But I mean, nothing's set in stone, right? So when I look into that, I mean, those for me are topics for us to have a discussion if we want to include these things or not. And they might even, for instance, if you look into beam validation, then maybe it can become like an optional spec, kind of like we have some optional things for JOT, right? But I think we still have to have those discussions. At least in my mind, there is no decision on how to move forward in either JPA or beam validation.
Yeah, that came from the discussion in we put out that document where everyone submitted their ideas, and then we just moved it into the plan as things to discuss, not necessarily decisions made. And so, you know, just to add to Roberto's comments, you know, I also mentioned beam validation in my comments in that doc, because we've got like a prototype that you can validate JWTs with beam validation and put the annotations on methods, and then say, you know, I only want to accept people calling this method if they've got these particular things in their JWT, and use beam validation to say what that should look like. But we have to get caught up on the latest specs before we would propose that. So, you know, we're several months away from that. So I don't know that for us it would happen this year, but if there are use cases, I don't have a problem with people.
Yeah, and me neither. I have no issue if we have a reasonable, if we have some good reasons to include them, if it benefits the user. But this request now came a bit out of the blue. So we have to implement Jakarta beam validation there. So without any prior discussion,
so
at least not what I know.
Right. So can I give you just a quick context for this whole conversation? So basically, is for the program plan, like there's issues trying to trying to kick off this issue conversation. So I raised the kind of the issue on the JWT, and also similarly, I raised the issue on the Open API. The purely to just get the conversation going is in no means to force people to to do the you have to get a beam validation in like a JWT. Basically, we're trying to just start talking about it. So basically, it's are there any good benefit? If you're saying no, or we don't see there is any sensible usage for that, that's fine. So at least we come back to say we're not going to integrate beam validation with the JWT. However, in Open API, is people. Sorry, just one more sentence. In Open API, it's a great idea. We already have done this in small, right? So basically, it's just a stack it. Sorry, David.
Yeah, I was just gonna say at this time, right? So, you know,
yeah,
we were talking about the in JWT with beam validation. You know, at this time, it's, you know, someday, you know, we wrote it. It's functional, but we're not up to date with the specs to really be in a position to be, you know, one of the implementations there for the vote, right? So that's what would be required. So there's no point in us proposing it until we can actually meet all the other requirements.
Well, I believe Rudy has a point on a thing, right? And I think that was the source of confusion, because this came out as issues in the individual specs, right? And now basically we're seeing like, yeah, OpenAPI is interested in having that, and JOT doesn't really see any a needs for it, right? So you have one wants it and the other one don't, but the decision cannot be made in that way. It needs to be done at the platform level. So it doesn't make much sense to have those discussions. I mean, it makes sense to have those discussions in individual specs, but in the end, it's going to have to be the platform group to decide if those specs are going to be adopted or not.
Yeah,
And that needs to be done in a more general discussion. And these meetings for the architectural calls are exactly for that.
Yeah, what mainly triggered me was it was the title of the issue set integrate with bean validation. It was not really proposed there as a question or starting point for discussion. It was do it. So that was
okay. I guess that
was
was
a bit
also a miscommunication issue on how the issue was created.
It's my fault. I didn't I in the issue itself, I can't remember. I thought it's kind of just start a conversation. So it's
yeah, okay.
I can correct
and
that.
it's fine, and I agree with it. But as I said, it was just a bit confused about that. It seemed as the things that we discussed that we put on the plan for this year, that it was already accepted without any discussion or see how valid is or whatever. So that was a bit I worry that it was a bit jumping too fast. But okay, it's clarified. I will also put it on the Jira for JWT.
Yeah. So basically, because it's in the plan. If we say we are not going to do it, at least we assess the situation. We have the reasoning why we are not going to do it. So and then the plan has not been met because of this. It's not like we have the plan. So I was quite nervous plan and we didn't do anything about it. So it's now is we at least we start a conversation.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of the basically we just have a way to at least in the program plan that issue I create 2 issues and then eventually just an update to say maybe JWT reading it hasn't got a real use case to adopt a beam validation and etc.
We can just leave it there until the end of the year, and when we have to kind of evaluate where we are, we'll just, okay, it didn't happen. We had the opportunity. We discussed it.
Yeah.
No one came up with any things at this time, and so.
Realistically, that's not going to happen before MicroProfile 5. So, if we have 4.1 in the next couple of weeks, and then we have 5 late in October, I don't see we're going to find time to actually move that forward.
Yeah, one of the things that I did when I did some of the website infrastructure related issues is I found the comments in the community voices doc and I put them in the description so that way people could see the sources of them, and it's a little easier to not get misled by a strong title when there's the actual description of what people were saying, or to know where this came from.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, but
I think more information, to see the context and etc. It will help.
Yeah, so in some way link back to the community voices document.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you. So it's kind of the other thing is kind of in the similar box. Basically, is so other goals for the program plan. We have to kick them off and at least to discuss them, and it's kind of we need to at least some new specs and etc. We have to not saying okay we have to create these new specs. The first conversation is do we need to. So it's these kind of things. We just gradually work through the list and come back with some new findings and kick off the discussion. We have 2 more minutes. Do you want? There's one more item about discuss MicroProfile context propagation. This is a Google group discussion. This posted by Nathan. I think Kevin mentioned last time for this one. Basically, it's kind of trying to move a MicroProfile context propagation to Jakarta EE concurrency stack.
Well, to provide some context, and I was very surprised. I mean, I was surprised when I saw this starting to happening, but maybe because I didn't have enough context. But following up the effort that's been happening in the CN4J group, I think that we agree is that nothing was going to be moved around without, well, having some buy-in between both communities, right? And this kind of flew under the radar, right? So there was some work being done to move some context propagation stuff to Jakarta concurrency, which I believe that it should have been discussed at first, at least. On the other hand, it seems that some of the context propagation stuff, APIs that are being moved, were designed in MicroProfile first because there was no way to add them to Jakarta, or else they will just go to Jakarta first, which kind of justifies why they're being moved right now. But still, I think it makes sense for us to discuss it here because of, for instance, we have the example that's happening with config, right? Even though config it's a much bigger spec, and we're talking about the entire config spec, and here we're only talking a couple of APIs, right? But my point was that I just wanted to be alert on what's going on because this may start happening with other specs, right? And we don't want these things to happen all the time.
Yeah, I think this is why Nathan put here for discussion. It seems nobody commented.
Right.
I think Kevin, you brought up last time, asking people to comment, right, Kevin?
Right. At last week's meeting, I did bring it up to make people aware of it and to try to get some conversations going. But this is kind of what Nathan had expected because, Nathan had brought it up on their weekly calls. And it's, from an MP perspective and from a Jakarta concurrency perspective, those teams are in agreement that yes, these APIs were defined originally to be an extension to Jakarta concurrency, but there was, just like what Roberto said, there was no means to bring it in at that point. And now there is. So this is what they're trying to propose, is to bring them over. And so one of the things that, I did point out to Nathan is that, okay, even though you have the discussions on your weekly calls, you do have to kind of bring it forward to a wider audience with the Google group just to see, maybe there's people that are not attending your weekly calls. And so we need to get their voices heard. And you know what, now this has been out there for 2 weeks almost, and it's, still no additional activity. So it seems like, they've done their due diligence. He was going to, once we got the okay here, he was going to post it to the CN4J Alliance as well as an FYI and give, reference to the proposed issues or whatever. So trying to let people know and voice any concerns or suggestions or whatever.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. It's past the top of the hour. I think we can carry on the conversation offline. So do comment, share your views on this one. So with that, I think that's the end of this call. Thank you all for attending the call.
Thanks, Emily.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you all. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good job.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.